I've been using the Rokinon or Samyang, depending where you're from, Cine AF lenses for the last couple years or so. Today this video is not going to be a technical review, but more my thoughts on using these in real world scenarios for the last couple years. I primarily bring them out on corporate and smaller crude commercial gigs, and I'll be putting that footage throughout this video. But overall, they're lightweight, they have reliable autofocus, and they have a pretty clean image, but these lenses are not without their quirks and downsides. After 2 years of using these are the lenses that I choose to bring a lot of the times whenever I don't want to overthink it. Now, just to be clear, I bought these with my own money and no one is paying me or sponsoring me to say anything, so these are my honest thoughts. So to start out, the Cine AF cover from 20 all the way to 100. They have a 20, a 24, a 35, a 45, a 75, and a 100. They're T1.9 across the board, except for the 100, which is a T2.3. The lenses themselves are all very lightweight, just shy of 300 grams, which is very convenient when you're swapping lenses on a gimbal. But also with the lightweight, it makes it even easier to shoot a lot of handheld work, especially as the bodies get bigger, like the Burano. Another thing that's really impressive about these lenses, especially for the price, is the color seems to be matched across the entire set of the glass. It feels like a matched Cine set, but without the hefty price tag. The biggest selling point about this glass for me was the autofocus, and it's surprisingly good, and it's only gotten better as the years have progressed. In fact, I would say it's 95% as good as the Sony G-Master zooms that I have. When this glass is on my camera, I primarily live on autofocus, unless there's a very specific detail that I need to focus on. I found that I rarely have to toss any footage due to the autofocus, and if I do, it's probably because of Sony's system, not necessarily the glass. Now, the autofocus is handy across the board for wide scenes, tight scenes, medium scenes, but where I really think that it shines is if you're in a not-so-pleasant location and you need to shoot an interview. I've done many interviews on these lenses, and I'll just tap on their face and it will stay locked on the entire time. These lenses don't seem to hunt like I've seen in some other third-party glass. Honestly, like I said, they're about 95% as good as the G-Masters. The autofocus motors and the lenses seem to be up to par with everything that I've needed to do. Now, I will say the 100mm seems to focus the slowest, but it's never caused a problem to where I busted a shot. Given that these lenses are third-party, Samyang and Rokinon are constantly working to improve them, and the autofocus has only improved over the last few years. You can take these lenses and plug them into the computer with their adapter, they have a software, and then through that software you're able to update the firmware on the lens. You can change the rotation of the focus ring, how far the throw is, the custom button, the switch, and even enable or disable the status lights that are on the lenses. All that said, whenever I got these 2 years ago, I didn't know how post support would be, and I've been very happy with what Samyang and Rokinon is doing. You've heard it said that the lens is the paintbrush for the cinematographer, or maybe the camera, and I think that that's true. So let's talk about the look and characteristics of these lenses. The lenses are sharp, but they're not clinically sharp like we've seen in some past Rokinon lenses. These are what I like to call tastefully neutral. They're a good blank starting canvas. If you're like me and you shoot on a range of projects from corporate to commercial, some projects need to be clean, and then some projects need a little bit more characteristic, and I think that that's where these lenses serve. They give you a good blank canvas to do some effects in post. Now, there is some projects where I want to bake those effects in, and so I'll choose different lenses. And then there's some projects where it makes more sense for me to dial those in post, so I'll layer different tools like scatter and dehancer and add my bloom and halation and stuff like that in post. Like we talked about earlier, I've noticed that the color and contrast ratio of these lenses is pretty well matched across the set, and that's been something that's been confirmed in other lens reviews. Now, one optical characteristic that's definitely not a plus for these lenses is that they do breathe. It's not hidden. These are definitely stills lenses under the hood that have been rehoused. But given all the projects that I've shot on these lenses, it's never been a point where it just busts the entire shoot or the entire shot. I think for the price, it's an acceptable trade-off. Now let's talk about some unique things that Rokinon and Samyang did with these lenses. First of all, they created a series of different accessories that work well with the lenses. They included these contacts on the front, which allow the lenses to communicate with different accessories that are built for the lenses. And the first one that I got was the manual focus adapter. Now that's really cool because it adds the ability to have hard stops on the lenses. And so if you wanted to use these lenses with your AC and their wireless follow focus, or you wanted to use these lenses with your own whip, then now you can do that with the manual focus adapter. Each of these lenses has a set of contacts and a positive lock on the front of them, and that mount allows the lenses to accept a manual focus or anamorphic adapter. Let's talk about the manual focus for a second. The manual focus adapter is very useful when you need proper manual control. It gives you hard stops on your focus, otherwise the lenses just spin, and then it takes what was your focus ring and turns it into your iris ring. Now it does give you hard stops and opens up some doors there, but it closes some doors because it limits your options for filtration. There is no screw-on option for ND, so you have to use a matte box. I own it and I've used it sparingly on commercial and narrative work, but overall I think it's just a fun way and a new take on what lenses can be as we enter this new era of autofocus. Another fun accessory that they came out with was the anamorphic adapter. The anamorphic adapter is also really unique. It gives you a whole new set of lenses with the same lenses that you have already bought. Now, I don't own the anamorphic adapter and I haven't even got to use it yet, but that's something that's on my list and I'm excited to play with at some point. Now, this is also something that's not sponsored and that I bought with my own money, but I want to talk about the ND system that I've been using with these lenses and my FX3 that match well with my FX6 and Burano, and that's the K&F magnetic filters. I used my buddy Clark's magnetic ND filters at one point, and I fell in love with how fast it was to swap ND filters. And I took a deep dive and eventually landed on the K&F magnetic variable ND system. Now, for this system, you do have to have two filters, but there is no X pattern. So basically, you have a lightweight and then a heavyweight ND system. I ended up going with the 82mm so that I could put it on my Sony G Master zooms, and then I just bought a step-up ring for my Rokinons. So let's talk about what you get if you're getting into these lenses. These are lenses that I've come to trust when I need speed and reliability. I've used them on commercial and corporate and even some doc work, and they've never got in the way, which is a huge plus. I think if you want a set of glass that has really strong character, these are definitely not it. But if you want a set of glass that's reliable and just a good blank slate, these are definitely something worth looking at. The manual focus on the lens is good and I've never really had an issue, but it is fly-by-wire, so it can drift a little bit. That being said, if you have a shot that's super critical, I would recommend getting the manual focus adapter. The breathing on the lenses is a little real, but so is the price at sub $500 a pop. That being said, they may be some of the better lenses in their price category. My name's Keaton. I'm sharing my journey and what I'm learning along the way. If you want to continue growing together, consider subscribing. This is just the beginning of the conversation.